Okay.
People can want.
Yeah.
All right, on that, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 1 o'clock. For the recording, roll call.
Randy Mason?
Trey Krause.
Jess Beringer.
Mark Saunders.
Linda Kaufman, all present, so we have a quorum. Sent the minutes, I forget when, but a bit ago, for the March 21st meeting. Any corrections, changes, comments?
No.
Look good.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to accept
Second.
as submitted.
Hang on, so I get it all for the, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, any correspondence? I did not get anything on this particular one. Okay, so what I thought we would do is, let me get that, Jess, sorry. There's 2 items for old business that need to be discussed, and then I started putting down new business items depending on how far along we get. A couple things I want to bring this group up to date. There's all sorts of things happening in the parking world right now that, once again, we tend to not be included until after the fact. So apparently on Wednesday, there's an agenda item for the commissioners that has to do with trying to resolve the clear space parking. And the proposal is that, and Susan, I'm gonna call on you if I get this wrong, but within 250 feet of traffic circles.
225.
25, sorry. So that's obviously, in my opinion, spot zoning, but it is what it is. That any commercial establishment that requires parking would only have to have 20, no matter what their requirement is. So what that is doing is saying something like clear space, or if a hotel or anybody else that is required to have parking, large restaurant, they'd only have to provide 20 spaces. Now, to me, that's completely opposite of what we've been trying to say, whereas everybody has to make their fair share and continue to support the fact that we need parking in downtown. And that only, in my mind, exasperates it. I can't go Wednesday. I don't know how important it is, but I wanted to put it out there today as something if we wanted to have someone go and chat about it.
I was going to go anyhow. So
I don't know how anybody feels about it. I'm not trying to center necessarily on clear space. I guess what I'm centering on is what's our feeling about an ordinance that would pass that would require less parking than is currently required for commercial districts.
So that's not current. That's something that's being proposed.
Correct. Currently, if you're over 10,000 square feet for a restaurant or 15,000 square feet for a commercial, then you're required to have whatever the formula is based on things. So what they're proposing is that in that area, anything that's commercial would have only a requirement of 20 spaces, period.
And how many feet?
225.
225.
Feet from the circle.
So,
So you're asking us for our opinion.
I think it's worth us going, and I'm bringing it up even though we haven't really, I called under other business or whatever, because it just happened, and it's just on the agenda, and it's for Wednesday.
Well, it's good because I wrote clear space down as for new
Okay.
business because I felt when I read everything that we should be talking about it.
I certainly agree with you that they're opening the door to this spot zoning, which could have more repercussions for the town than
why
just
just from
this.
the circle? Why not 225 feet from the beach? Why not 225 feet from Jess's house?
Well,
Makes no sense.
I think their thought is, obviously they're trying to do something to accommodate this clear space, but I think the thought is that, and because one of the concerns was, right by the circle, it's already very congested and very hard to navigate as it is. And so if you had this parking lot that is going to be accepting and expelling cars at a number of different times in large quantities too, that's not good for that location. So they're trying to come around, get around the fact that traffic-wise, that's
But
probably
those
not good to have.
people that drive there will still drive there and need to park somewhere.
Well, and that's the big question. So
No,
then where are
It's
they
not
going
that
to
they just
park?
won't park or won't come.
And I want to be careful that we don't discuss clear space specifically, because
Right.
we don't have that on the agenda. I'm trying to be a little bit more holistic about it at this point, and that is, how do we feel about a potential change to zoning that says, in a commercial district in a certain area, you will be able to provide less parking today than you would have in the old zoning if it were to pass?
Is there any precedence anywhere else in the world that says within a certain distance of a circle like that? I mean, because otherwise, to create an ordinance to obviously accommodate someone somewhere somehow, not just one particular place, I think is not anything I'm in favor of, particularly as it relates to parking, that we're talking about here. Here you're saying, here's an entity that's going to bring in, a lot. I get it from where I sit in my business today with when they throw events in a much smaller venue. I mean, the parking is nuts and crazy there. So I'm not for that unless there's some sort of precedence that as a municipality they're drawing upon somewhere.
I can tell you in my experience, spot zoning historically is something that's not usually.
Is this spot zoning, or is it just like someone else, in some other municipality has, or multiple municipalities have that?
I can't
Around
speak to that.
a,
I've
around
never
a
heard
circle, I think would be the opposite.
I've never heard of
think you
it,
would
but
have
that
to
doesn't mean
provide
it doesn't exist somewhere.
I mean, you couldn't imagine like 7-Eleven over those years, if they didn't have parking, how they'd survive. How is someone else who's gonna have a lot
Well,
more gonna survive?
And I
It's
think
odd.
the big issue is, okay, then what happens to all those cars? Where are they pushing them to?
See, there's a little more to the story.
Yeah.
The planning commission had come up with an alternative suggestion, which seems to have been ignored, no offense, but which I thought was reasonable, and that was to allow them to have private off-street parking elsewhere. For instance, if they
Shared
wanted to take the
parking.
VFW parking lot, or they wanted to rent your driveway, or whatever, they could rent private space off-site, which they're not allowed to do now, which seemed like a good compromise.
Actually, they can, but it has to be within
Right.
700,
Right.
700 or
Do
800.
we have that?
700 feet,
700.
700 ownership, and we just changed it so that it didn't have to be the same ownership, that it could be either under contract with a
Right.
property owner or. it could be
There are
the
several
city
places in
maintaining
town that
property.
have
For
that
instance,
within 700
Our
feet.
new garage, if it were to come to reality, they could rent the top, for
And
So-
is this within 700 feet
No.
of the circle?
probably
No,
not.
of the certain, of clear space, not of the circle, would the garage be, I don't know, actually, I'm not sure it would be within.
So back to the original question, because again,
And
I'm
that
trying to
was
keep
picked
us
up
on
from
track
some
and not
others.
get us into a FOIA issue or a violation, but I just want to make sure that if Mark goes, if you wouldn't mind representing the
Oh, yeah,
parking
yeah.
at Wednesday, I personally think that we need to at least come out saying that at this moment in time, we're not in favor of reducing the amount of required parking that anybody has to have. Now, that's gonna come out looking like we're against clear space, but I think I'm looking at it holistically. While we're trying to figure out how to create more parking, this would be opposite of that.
But with all the announcements of new hotels who are gonna be asking for variances on parking, who are not gonna be able to meet what is required, it's just one it's a whole genre
Well,
of them.
so far they all are
So
gonna.
far, they're meeting.
They're all gonna meet that. What they might be able to do is turn around and challenge it and once again take away parking that we're trying to save for residents and tourists and consumers.
I would be against approving it.
Yeah, I think we should certainly raise the issue, that there's concern.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the word you wanna,
And
are you okay, Mark,
Oh,
if you do
absolutely.
that?
Yeah, that's concern, that's
I was
press on
doing
us.
anyhow, I would speak on my
And-
behalf, I'll just speak on behalf of the committee.
Yeah,
and
on
just-
behalf of the
Say the
committee.
same thing I was gonna say anyhow.
So concern about the spot zoning for parking
Keep
regulations
it generic,
and,
And reducing the number,
reducing the number that code currently requires.
right.
okay. I appreciate that, and like you said, I apologize for kind of throwing it out, but it just,
That's okay.
And
To make
I
it
just found
official,
out.
maybe if you have time to write me a statement, that I can sort of follow, that I can say this is what was approved by the committee,
Okay.
or if what you just said is good enough, we'll just use that.
Do you think it's worthwhile to go on to say, and in any situation where where that's even being considered, they certainly must consider what happens to those cars? Where are they pushing them off to? They need to take that into consideration.
Okay.
Yes.
And so reduction plus ramifications.
Yeah, right.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So, under old business then, the parking deck. Based on our last meeting, we recommended that the city form some sort of task force. And we came up with a group of people, I forget the whole list, but it was a planning and all of those things. I sent that on to Paul and the commissioners. I sent it to all the commissioners, including the mayor. And I'm happy to say that it was taken up as a recommendation. So that first meeting is Friday, I believe, and I'm planning on attending. Certainly, if anybody else has any interest in attending, I think more than one from this group would be fine. I'm certainly not trying to be exclusionary about it, but we are starting that, so I think that's at least a good conversation to get started.
Did they actually appoint a committee or?
I guess you would call it a committee. I don't know if it's a committee, a task force, a working group. I don't know what it is. All I know is that
So they've already rounded up the group.
at 1 o'clock on Friday, we have a meeting. But I don't think it's the whole group yet. I'm not quite sure. It seemed like it might have been a couple of us to figure out what the next steps are, but I can't say that for sure.
But your invitation is to actually be a part of that group, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I think that Mark asked some very good questions at the presentation, and I'd love to see follow-up on your specific questions, because it's an area of expertise that I don't happen to hold on the leaseholders and, ramifications and.
I suspect that will all come up at a later time, probably not at the very first meeting. I think they're just sort of putting the skeleton together.
That's the impression I got. There was no agenda, and it was just like, can you be here at 1 o'clock or something on Friday? So what I'd recommend, if it's okay with you, is I'll go, I'll figure out what's going on, and then figure out where we fit into it at the next step. What I did want to report, though, was that it is happening, so that's at least good for that sort of cross-section task force to be looking at all of the issues.
Okay.
But having said that, anybody else wants to go instead of me Friday? I'm happy. I'm happy to do that.
Are they serving lunch?
I doubt it.
I don't know.
Okay, so let's talk about the deck a little bit, because I know we wanted to have some further conversation. Where are we at this point? Should we wait for the meeting? Do we want to have more conversation? I don't know if you saw, but after our meeting, which of course the headlines weren't quite, sorry about that, accurate. Yeah, I know. I know. The headline did not reflect what we said. The headline said that we approve, which wouldn't that be wonderful if we could approve anything?
Yeah.
But what we did do was recommend that it needs to be further investigated. And I think that is, an approval to keep going forward with all of the questions.
And I guess I have a question about that. When do we cross the line? How far do we investigate? Are we going to be concerned about income and expenses? Are we going to let the commissions be concerned about an income? Are we going to be concerned about the money we lose from the 100 spaces to get the 300 spaces? I mean, where is the line drawn that it's no longer our problem, it's the commissioner's problem?
I suspect that that's going to be this task force issue to investigate all of that, because at least the way I presented it was, we need to look at all, and I brought all of the pieces up that we talked about, the concern of those spaces, the concern of the leased land, and, all of those things. So I don't have the solid answer, but I suspect that this
meeting.
task force, because I got a call by one of the commissioners after that recommendation saying, well, why isn't the parking committee heading in? And I said, because it's much bigger than the parking committee. You're talking about leased land, you're talking about financing, you're talking about lots of things that go beyond us that we participate, but it's not ours to lead. It's a city project.
I mean, for us, it's more of the concept, I guess,
Right.
isn't it? And then the logistics would be what this group is working for the commissioners to then make a decision.
So, I mean, do we want to talk about it much more, or do we want to wait and see what happens Friday and I can report back? How do you guys want to handle it?
Well, I've had people come to me, and I've gone to other people, and everybody, I think, is very interested
Yes,
in it.
I would agree
think
with
it's
that.
across the board. I think a lot of people think we're getting 300 more spaces, which is fine if that's the perception that they're gonna get. The location is interesting, you know, I heard a lot of comments, well, people aren't using that lot anyway, and that's fine, because eventually they will. I mean, when it maxes out and things start moving further down, or up Rehoboth Avenue, there's gonna come a dire need for that. So I think that's really cool. I had a lot of people, in discussion. We talked about, like, I had my idea, and I'd still like to really throw that out there while we're doing this, have the opportunity to look at it. Is there a way to make it bigger with something, you know, like the convention hall on top, where it then becomes more than just, what did he call it, a mobility center or
Yeah,
something
that's
like
the
that?
that's the new thing. They're not
Right, where
parking
it's a
structures
little bit
anymore.
more than that, and it provides, you know, another element to the city that makes it that much more special.
And
I just really would like to make sure that that is discussed, because I've heard it from people who've been here a long, long time, to people who are new, to people who are not necessarily residents, so those are residents and businesses, that, you know, that sounds like a really great idea. And because this, you know, we missed the opportunity to do something with this venue down here, and I think so much more could be done with that. And it's perfect because the parking's right there, and it wouldn't really interfere as much. But to have a vista, and, you know, they could get a variance for height. I don't, you know, you look around, there shouldn't be too many people really totally concerned with the height and where it would be located at that moment. You know, the fire company's not gonna complain, the hotel's not gonna complain, the city hall's not gonna complain, and the rest are just commercial businesses. I think it would be just spectacular to have an event that far up where you'd have a view of the ocean and all of Rehoboth. So that's,
and
after
so
that, I'm for it, and I'm okay with any other decision.
2 points on that. I'm writing down the kinds of things that we would take as things that we were interested in to this committee. And so I'm putting that, you know, potential investigation of larger multi-use, which we think we all talked about before. I put about the concerns of leased land and, you know, revenue.
Ending up paying
cost,
for it.
right.
My concern is that they would always, they would be able to walk away, lose nothing
Well,
other than
someone
their
else
time.
owns it then.
And
The
we
bank
do.
owns it. No,
We would.
then
Well,
what happens is a bank would own it.
well, we would have to take over, we being the city, would have to take over, because we couldn't be foreclosed on. We couldn't have our parking lot foreclosed on, so we would have to take over that mortgage, remortgage it. So
So-
we could have liability if they walked away. That's
So
a
I've got those
concern.
as issues.
Right. We want to make sure they have some sort of personal assurances that they're good for it.
And I think all of that would come out once we start seeing the.
And that was
the
my
lease
question,
terms.
is that our job to be concerned about, or should we let the lawyers be concerned
Well,
about that?
I think what I'd like to do is bring our ideas and
Right,
issues
right,
as part of it, put it on the table as
Right.
agenda items, and then
Right.
let that group
Mhm.
sort them out.
After the meeting too, I was a little concerned that he had mentioned, he wouldn't say what after Tony had asked him repeatedly, what our minimum lease would be that we could count on. He wouldn't agree to an amount. He wouldn't even say that it would be equal to the revenue from 100 spaces we would be losing. So we could actually be in the negative.
Yeah, and I think in defense of them on that, they're still not quite sure if this is gonna go out for RFP. And so they didn't wanna
I
give
understand.
all of their, they didn't wanna negotiate in public and then lose, so, but those would be.
The general public's thinking, what we've heard is that it's free, that, you know, the city has nothing to lose. Well, the city could. We could end up paying for it. We could lose the revenue from the 100 spaces that we're giving up.
Actually, all the social media comments were the city was gonna be spending $10 million.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
right, yeah, I
They-
saw that one too.
It's good that you've heard that, because the other side of the comments that I've heard, and not directly, but, you know, some of the social media and whatever you read is, there is this faction of people and groups of people that say, we don't want any more people in town, we don't want any more traffic, we don't want any more congestion. And Susan, I'm not gonna put you on the spot from a planning, but I know that at least by the comprehensive development plan, a parking garage wasn't necessarily part of the CDP of the last thing.
Not in 2010, right. I
Right.
mean, I think it's something that would certainly be talked about for the next one.
But that's the one piece I've heard about, and, you know, to me, that's sort of an interesting, and there are places that are trying to do that, limit the amount of people, limit the amount of cars, and limit the amount of foot, or traffic, and make it more foot and bike and things like that, so that would be the opposite side of that, and I don't know if you heard, I mean, you obviously had much more of an ear to the commercial and the.
I think if there's any comments being made, it's to the caliber of demographic coming in as to how it can support the commercial ventures that are in our town. I mean, we're basically being used as a parking lot for people to go to the beach and come back out. I mean, that's kind of what is happening. And that, the way I see it is if you go up and down the coast, that's what the state park is for. You know, for people who are just going to the beach, they can park close, they can go and take care of it. The only issue is they can't smoke and they can't they have to bring their garbage back out. They can do all of that here. So they tend to come here a little bit,
And we give them bathrooms on top of it all.
and we give them bathrooms.
Do you guys have you heard any input or anything after our last meeting?
I've just heard positive input.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that two people in a row asked me, when did this group approach the city? It's interesting, we just finished City Hall, and it's too bad that it couldn't have been a coordinated effort.
Mhm.
Did they approach us in the past that you would know of?
I can't speak to that. I can tell you
Okay.
that as, was I working as a consultant at the time or as a person? I don't remember. But when City Hall was proposed, when the first City Hall was designed, before this one, when TV Ball and Associates, then I was a consultant at that point. I worked with TV Ball to design the parking to go with it. And at that point, the current administration and mayor terminated the contract with TV Ball. And that didn't happen. And then 2 years later, they brought back the concept of a city hall and redid it with a brand new firm who did not think that parking needed to be done with it. And I was not a consultant anymore, but as a person in the industry and understanding is I stood up several times saying that this is the opportunity to put parking as part of City Hall. And it was
Okay.
Decided that that would not happen.
It's Monday morning quarterbacking, but it's good to know what the background
That was the
is.
history of it.
Because the people inferred to me that here we are with all of these expenditures at one time, whether it's the outfall or the sewer system or the city hall, and here now, a parking garage, they don't really believe that we're not gonna become financially involved.
Oh, you know, the public-private partnership that was proposed is, it's pretty common. And actually, this particular one that he was proposing is a much more lucrative for the city than others that I have seen. Others have a lot more stringent requirements of all rate increases have to go to the partnership, or some even go so far as to say that they have to control what the rates are on street, because obviously the on-street things. But I questioned them several times on that, none of that. So it's actually not a bad, on the surface.
It seems to me that there could be some good PR that explains that to the public without giving away their trade secrets, that would ease the people who say, here we go again. You know, is it gonna be 10 million or?
And I think one of the first questions that this group is going to come up with is, does this need to be an RFP process, or is this enter into as, so in the political or the public world, you can do professional services without having to bid or RFP, but I don't know how Glenn and the city's administration is going to look at this one, so.
That's a point, you know, that when you talk about Friday, to speak about, make sure that the meters are our decision, to make sure, you know, what you just said, that I think should be a part of that Friday group.
Okay.
Coming out of our department, because, I mean, we've made the recommendations of pricing and all that stuff
Which we're going
to do all
Talk
that,
again?
you know, and so, I mean, that would again, you know, be, I think, fall underneath our umbrella.
Well, while most of the comments that I've heard have also been positive in terms of people saying, yeah, we've needed this for a long time, I think there still needs to be, as with everything with the city, some PR and improved PR explaining something about particularly the finances. Because I've heard people objecting, and they're coming up with these wild ideas
It's still
that are coming
gray.
out.
We really haven't been told
Well-
what they will really be.
Well,
That's-
exactly, but there's already concern about the increase in taxes being proposed and the increase in sewer fees, and now there's a large group saying, and now they're throwing this at us.
Yeah, and that's-
So that they
that's
are,
one of
Did
so
you
that
hear,
they
you
are
weren't here for the
opposed.
meeting, but their proposal was that they were going to take a mortgage out on the land, using the land as collateral. And of course, with no investment of their own into it, they could walk away, you know? And then we would have to take over the mortgage to prevent being foreclosed on, you know, losing our parking lot. So So there could be liability. We
Right.
can't
Yeah,
say that
yeah.
it's liability-free. The best we could hope for is that we can somehow tie their feet to it, that they can't walk away without losing their firstborn or whatever.
Or second.
Or second, not that we want any of them, but.
All right, so anything more than on that? Sharon, I saw you just walk in. We're just talking the parking deck. Is there anything, not to put you on the spot, but we're just finishing up talking about the parking deck. I explained that we're meeting Friday for the first time with the task force. That we've got a list of things that we want to bring as concerns or questions or positive comments. But we're not really going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but is there anything you wanted to add on it, or is that pretty much?
No, it's just getting started, so really nothing to talk about until we have the first meeting.
Okay.
Will that be recorded?
Is that a meeting? Is it a committee? Is it?
It's just a committee.
So it will be recorded?
Oh, yes.
Okay, cool. I'll listen.
Okay. So the other thing we decided that we needed to tackle today was looking at the 2018 recommendations and sort of kind of going through and saying, yep, let's keep them. Nope. Maybe we didn't need to do that, or let's wait and see, and whichever it falls. I think I have some of these extras that I have from before. And remember, there was a couple errors on them, but I think overall. Whoever was sleeping at home just got
Thank you.
woken up. So, maybe the best way to do that is just sort of go through the list and determine, you guys kind of give me some input, but just go step by step and kind of say, yep, because my idea at the end of this is we would go back to the commission and say, you know what? Here are the recommendations we did before. 80% of them are still in effect. We want you to consider them again, or some hybrid of that.
I asked if we could possibly, on a monthly basis, get a report on permit sales that would give us some kind of indication whether these changes are working, or that we would tweak them.
Yeah, we need stats.
What the impact is.
Yeah, what is there would already be a sign of impact from people who bought a yearly permit relative to this time last year.
Yeah, I'll send Sharon an email outlining, because in my mind, we want to see the different things, how many of those through the rental, through the whatever,
Right.
and see what we can get. So I'll kind of get you a list of the kind of stuff, and then on a monthly basis, it would help to see where we are with that, and even compared to last year.
Randy, since you're real estate involved, what have you heard? And that permit change fee and all that, is there anything you've heard from
I've
the
heard
whole permitting and?
I've heard a couple of objections to the change for people who have rental licenses suddenly having to pay a lot more. And, I'm sorry, I never saw a reason why they should get such a steep discount. They're a property owner like everyone else. There are always going to be some disgruntled people, but overall, no, I haven't heard anything.
Because like Joe had mentioned before, like $110 business license, and and I think they upped the license, didn't they?
No, they did not. They did not make a change to
They
that.
didn't make a change
So
to that also?
that's something
Still
that will still be
$110?
on our list.
Yeah, I think that's still going to be on our
That we
list.
would consider
I thought
giving
that- I
again.
thought
So,
that
yeah.
changed.
They upped some of the business licenses, didn't they? I thought they got rid of the $80 ones or something. Sharon would know. Sharon, didn't they?
Aren't you glad you showed up to our meeting, Sharon?
I believe there was only one license that did go up. And it
Did
went
the
up
business
maybe-
licenses
maybe
change?
The low price
Yeah,
one
it
went up or
may have gone
something,
up
yeah.
$20, but
Right.
Did the business licenses change for this year?
They're going out.
But did the cost go up? Or did they stay the same? Do you remember?
Say that again?
The cost of the business licenses?
Yeah, many of them increased.
Okay, so I'll ask for that too, so that we can see what that is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Okay, we'll get that. All right, let me,
You're still in the first one about.
well, we just tackled one, so let me get to that at least. All right, so increased cost for additional permits for rental properties, that was done. I don't think we need to address it.
No.
Okay. I won't call on me again, Sharon, I promise.
I will.
Let's talk about extending the meter season, May 1st to September 30th. The meter season did not change.
Correct.
The permit season changed slightly to correspond to the meter season. I saw with interest that Lewis meters went into effect starting May 1st.
Right before their Tulip Festival.
They've always been there.
You know, maybe not May 1st, but certainly, it seems to me that we're missing an opportunity for better control and revenues and a lot of things by not extending the season to some extent.
I think during the week, it's not totally necessary, but the weekends have to be. I mean, and that could be even year-round. I mean, it's ridiculous when in February you can't find parking on a Saturday. That's nice.
With new meter technology, in the future, we'll be able to change just randomly for a weekend in October or the Witches Festival, right?
You can, I don't know what we got. So, again, what I want to do is kind of just come up with recommendations and let them work into those kinds of things. But it would seem to me that we still want to look at some extension of the meter season.
I am definitely in favor of extending.
Whether it's,
So we should keep that as an agenda item, but not necessarily know what it is we
Right,
want to do right now.
right, we're not going to tackle what it is.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to
exactly.
figure out which day.
Right,
So,
yes,
so-
yes,
We're not
so-
satisfied with the.
Yes.
all right, so yes, we want to keep that in some form, and it could be just weekends, certain
Right.
times, or whatever. Okay. Enforcing feeding, supposedly, that will be happening. And the times were taken from 2 hours to 3 hours, so I think that was actually
Done with that.
implemented.
So now it only costs someone $24 a day to be parked right near the boardwalk and they're on the beach,
They'd have to move though.
which is still.
But they theoretically have to move with meter feeding
Okay.
being enforced.
All right, good.
One spot to another.
Yeah,
We had said change meter time 9 to 9, they ended up going 9 to 10. So I don't see any change to that, it seems,
It
Yeah,
made
but-
sense, actually, because
yeah.
we said 10 to 10 originally,
Right.
but then there was legitimate complaints
Yeah.
from the business owners, I think, that they get deliveries and they have special programs and yada, yada,
It's 10 to
yada.
10 now.
10 to 10,
Right.
yeah, not 9 to 10.
That's
10 to
right, sorry,
10
it's
now.
now
We-
10.
we-
Right, we had said 9, we
It's
changed a bunch of different times, but it
I
would
don't
seem to me
regret
that
them
it's,
not doing that.
right. I'm good with that.
Says
Right.
it's imminent, okay.
All right, so that's good.
But even that is something we should keep our eye on to see how has that impacted
Yeah.
things, negatively, positively.
Right.
I think all of these
Yeah,
are
we'll-
something we
we'll
have to
continue-
keep.
we'll continue,
Right.
okay,
It's just
good.
whether they stay on the agenda for, okay.
Got it.
Increase meter in the core area to $3, that was done. Again, wait and see if it was enough. Perhaps our recommendation is to increase it again based on what's happening, maybe not, but I think it's a wait and see.
I've heard nothing but bad from my customers on that. I mean, they may have the money there, but they don't want to spend their money on $3 an hour parking. That much I know. I mean, I'm like, I'm not anticipating that being positive.
Okay. Well, in the scope of trying to get people off of Rehoboth Avenue, it still goes back to that whole concert seating, so maybe that's one of those wait and see how it works, if it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, we can talk about this better in August or September.
Mm-hmm.
Extend the permit meter season, it did
We
partially.
did do that.
I would say that we would do that in conjunction, same thing where the meters and the permits are the same.
And the time of day would be included in that,
That's.
so that 5 o'clock
Yeah, where
is
is that
kind
one?
of
We'll get, how come that wasn't next?
I thought it was.
Well, because
a-
you have it under permits. You have
Oh, yeah,
a
probably
different
it's under
category
permits.
of
We'll get it to
under
permits.
yeah.
We'll get to that one. Extend permit enforcement to mirror meters, so that was sort of, that was not done at this point, maybe that was sort of the time too, but I think that needs to stay on to extending the
season was
permits,
done, but not the time.
but the times. Keep that one in?
Mhm. I think the residents really liked that idea and was sorry when that wasn't passed.
All right, we already talked about the cost, okay.
That was a mixed bag, because if they had any guests, their guests would not be able to, they'd have to have permits.
But they still get the 2 free.
No, like, I mean, like throw an event guest, like Joe was talking about how like at 5 o'clock, he has quite a gathering, people that come.
Well, right now, if at 5 o'clock I have a gathering, they don't have a place to park anyway. So I think it depends on where you are, but
I
at
think
least.
some of the residents, at least in our community, got the feeling that we were pushing them because of the meter increase and whatnot, pushing them into the free spaces after 5 o'clock. So that, we would be even more booked up than we are already because of people, and
I think
employees.
like I said, it was
mean,
a mixed bag.
You can see them drive down 4:45, they wait till 5 o'clock to get out of their cars and go to Dogfish or wherever they're going to work. All the employees are on our street, so, not that we don't want to do something for the employees, but it's sort of like, like to have a little better plan.
I mean, what I heard from the residents was that was the one disappointment, because even though there was a little bit of an inconvenience, someone was coming to the house at dinner at 7 o'clock, I had to make sure I either had a permit for them or they had to have a permit. They felt that there was a better chance of finding a place than having it free. Keeping in mind, and I've said this over and over again, the more free you have at a certain time, the less incentive anybody has to go someplace else or ride any kind of a shuttle. And so if we're ever going to get people to start thinking about moving from bringing their cars and parking to a shuttle or a jitney or whatever you want to call it, you have to have some incentives and some disincentives. And as long as it's free, that's...
It's been a long tradition, I think, in our neighborhood, which is also adjacent to your neighborhood, that you just put your own car in front when you have guests coming, so the guests can use your driveways. So now your car is out there taking up space. It doesn't really have to, but...
All right, next page was increased cost of business licenses. I'm going to get that from the city. Limit the amount of permits that are given free, the 222 proposal.
You did that, pretty much.
No, I thought they didn't. At the last minute, they didn't.
Oh, I thought they had.
You can still get an unlimited amount of permits.
That's correct, that is correct.
Yeah.
But not for the rental property.
No, that's different, because we're talking about
Okay.
residents.
No, it wasn't unlimited, you could
Residents,
still have it
yes.
based on how many people are on the deed, right?
Correct. You
Right.
could still get 10 if you have
Well,
10 people on the deed.
but-
So if
but
you
I-
live in Lewis, you can still get a free permit.
But the bigger issue really in town is not that we have 10 people on many deeds, it's that a couple will have 3 and 4 cars.
Correct.
But now, as long as they're on the deed, each of those cars gets to get a permanent, and then they still get the 2.
Right.
We were trying to limit that to 2, and if you
Sure.
have 3 cars, then you would have to pay.
Our
for
thinking
that.
still makes sense, even though.
Right.
I'd like to see that one kept in, because I think it
Yes.
makes sense to
Yes.
say that, you get a certain amount, the rest, like and keep in mind, that was part of the whole fair share where everybody was having a piece of this.
Right.
The residents were gonna have to pay a little bit more, the business people were gonna have to pay a little bit more with licenses, the people coming in town were gonna pay a little bit more, but everybody was gonna have a fair share in it. Extend the free permits to scooters, that was
Yes.
done, so we don't have to worry about that. Streamline permit costs, I don't know where,
Some of that may have been buying online.
yeah, I think it was more, if you remember, every time we looked at it, there was another category of all the permit fees, and we couldn't even keep
It's a
track
limited
of it.
number,
Right, okay.
So I mean, I think that's still a recommendation, that we
Mhm.
just keep looking at that. Increased permit fees, partially weekly were increased, I don't,
We just keep our eye on it. I'm not in favor of increasing anything other than dailies.
so keep an eye on it.
The
Well, and
deal
again, I'm
wasn't-
just
This is
bringing
my
it,
opinion.
yeah, no, what
No,
I
agree
plan
with
on,
you for the reason that you had mentioned earlier. It's the dailies that are using all the spaces.
what I plan on doing is taking these things that we're saying yes, and then having a further dive down into what we want out of it. I'm just trying to get this
If we have it
list.
in the agenda, we can always talk about it. If
Right.
it's not on the agenda, we can't talk
Right,
about it.
so I'm trying to get it down to where some of these things are just off the table. Use technology to issue permits and enforce permits and meters. I know they're moving towards things like that. I think we just keep an eye on that.
I love it. It's, like you go up to Newark and the university's parking garages are all done by a car just drives by, just, circles on by and they have the Park Mobile and then they've got one other one, I forget, that's all tied. And they use both of them. I think it's just, It's really cool, and I think that can also then be tied into how many spaces are available, which we've talked about here is having, so you drive around that town, is, you know, 3 spaces left here or 108 left here. And you,
I know the city has some proposals on moving towards technology. Obviously, there's a cost involved with all of it. The budget this year was a struggle, so I don't know if it even got into it, but I know that they're working towards it. Did you streamline any of the permit costs, or is it still all sort of the,
It stayed the same other than the weekly.
okay. Create criteria and process for placement and removal of 30 minutes. That was a recommendation. I have unknown. I still don't know what was done with that.
weren't streets and transportation involved in that too? Weren't they trying to?
Don't know. So it'll
I'd
be.
I'd like to.
Well, and, you know, the next one, our understanding is it is being reviewed, but the question is, with what criteria?
We need to take a look at that.
You're talking about 30 minutes?
Yes.
They took away the ones in front of the post office.
No, I know that. Not all of them, but that was all part, yeah, that was the one thing that we didn't recommend
Right, okay.
that got implemented.
Yes.
That's why they did it.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Really?
Now I got it. Wow, now, here I was looking at it the wrong way all that time. So the whole 30-minute was come up with a process, evaluate it, mark them better, and remove some of the restrictions. And what I don't know is where any of that is, and I don't want to keep impacting the people sitting in the audience. So we'll just find that stuff out.
Keep it on.
Keep it on. Same thing with the scooters. I know that it was talked about it by the commissioners that they were going to look at scooter spaces, try and put more in and create more scooter spaces, because that actually, as we said, 3 or 4 scooters can fit in every car space, so that's actually creating more. You can feel free to jump in at any point, but I don't want to make you part of the meeting.
I mean,
If
I
you
would
need-
create
need
some
to.
if I was given a tax break. Look, I've got space that I can't fit cars in, that I could fit, you know, quite a few.
You mean on
quite
your
a few-
private property?
On my private property, if I got a tax break, I would do it. So I imagine other people might too.
All right, I'm going to put that, I'll make a note of that, but bring that up when we start talking about that.
At what point do we start to consider bicycles similar to scooters? We're not promoting bicycles at all, and everybody else in the world is.
The transportation committee is supposedly tackling the bikes.
Okay.
That was one of the divisions that we have when we kind of split parking and transportation.
Transportation.
Yeah. And I don't know where they are with it, but I know that they've been working on certain things.
God, I wouldn't ride a bike around here.
Well, I watch.
Scooters move fast, bikes don't. You can't get out of trouble.
Permits for all commercial, that was done. Enforce vehicle size restriction or change size restriction. I don't know if that's being done, so that's a check. The parallel parking, the conversation on that, the thing was that for some reason we didn't need, some commissioners said we didn't need any more parking. And others, one in particular said that they wanted to actually slow people down and make a green space, not make more parking. So it wasn't done. I had also sent, after that, 2 or 3 streets that in my walks in the morning I found you could also change from parallel to diagonal or, whatever, and I don't think any of that's been done, so I think it stays on the
They did go around and they got rid of all the yellow spots where there was no longer a driveway. I saw the truck doing that a couple weeks ago.
Oh, good.
So there are now, I don't know how many in our neighborhood, probably 3 more spaces. People used to have circular driveways and they did away with the circular part. So they
Okay.
took away the yellow spots.
Was that done in the commercial area
I
also?
don't know, it's done in Country Club. I don't know
It was
where
one of
else.
our recommendations, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming things like
They-
this being worked on,
They
so
painted them black.
we'll just keep checking
I
those.
think that if we had come with how many spaces we could have added, I think if we looked at something like this, we might end up with adding 200 spaces without building a parking garage, almost. You know what I mean? If we went around and we could probably
Find abandoned spots.
we could probably find 100, 150
All right,
spaces
well,
by
maybe that'll be on
changing.
our agenda as one of our little homework assignments, is that we take a section and see, because
Because I'm on King Charles every day, and it's super wide, and I can't imagine, someone also said something about the vista,
Stan
said
said
it would change the vista of King Charles. But I mean, I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there could be so, and it's only like a block from the beach.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
I mean,
not in front, really in front of too many
So-
houses, on the sides of houses primarily.
If you think about it, if you don't want to be right at the boardwalk on the beach, to me, that's the logical place to park and go to the beach, because, you know, for a permit cost, it's there and it's available, and we could create, I think I did the calculation, I think it was
meters.
like 60 or 70 more spaces out of the whole street, but I think what we'll do is keep that on the agenda and try and maybe figure out as we go through how many it actually does.
Right.
Because I suspect you're right, if we now present things with more concrete numbers to things, perhaps they'll be more
Yeah, I
palatable.
think we were lacking statistics, and we were going more on gut, what is perceived as gut. I think if we go in with that, because like I said, I mean, if we can come up and say, hey, you know, the parking garages, we're gonna spend, you know, to gain 200, someone's gonna spend 10 million. We don't have to spend anything except paint. And we can effectively achieve, you know, a growth of that by going around the city and looking.
Yes,
And that might then get more favor now that there might be some pushback on, you know, the land issue and as well as perceived cost.
I think you're right. I think as we move forward on these agenda items, we get a little bit more factual. That's very good. Street signage, I know that there's a committee being formed looking at all of that. We were invited. I wasn't able to attend. I don't think any of us were. So I'd like to stay on the invite list, but I know that, I forget what day it was. Is it passed? Did it happen?
Yeah.
Coming up, whatever. I know I wasn't available. So we'll keep looking at that, because I think at the end of this, the public relations and signage campaign is probably one of the more critical things, because, you know, obviously the best thing we want to do is deter people from driving down Rehoboth Avenue, getting down to the bandstand, and circling and circling and circling.
This thing is very nice. Whoever did it did a very nice job. It's the new rules and regulations, and it's a map and what to do if you can't find a parking space.
Oh,
blah,
really?
blah, blah.
Good. We'll take a look at that.
Where'd you get that?
Right downstairs in the lobby. I got this at the homeowner association, but.
And I know we always have them in the real estate office too,
I try and have them in the
just
store.
because people,
I usually get stacks of things like this put in the store.
All right, so I think what I will do for the next meeting then is list these items that we say, yeah, we want to, and try and, you know, say whether we want to investigate, watch, do whatever, and that way that'll be our topics.
Did you skip over public relations campaign?
I thought I just kind of
That
threw
was
that all
last thing.
together with
With
the
the
streets and
signage.
things, but signage.
Related to that, I'm used to, in my corporate world, in the past, working where there was one person who was a spokesperson for any particular thing going on or for the whole company. And I think that you should be the spokesperson for our group to media, so that the correct information is going out instead of individuals talking.
I think for the most part I have been by, I don't know if there's an
So like
instance.
that last article where I was quoted, it just came off the
It
tape.
came off the meeting,
Comes off the meeting, and there's no way of blocking that.
Oh, is that how that comes
yeah.
off?
Yeah, I wasn't
Oh.
interviewed.
Yeah,
I
if,
assumed they were approached and.
no,
said,
oftentimes
you know,
there's a reporter sitting
What
there.
is your committee doing? All right.
But I will say that anytime they've asked for comments on tape, on, you know, I've been there, I've done that, I've sent things, so I think for the, yeah,
Yeah, be careful what you say.
yeah, so, you know, say it right there, people are watching, everything.
Is there anything you want to unsay?
It shows you how old I am.
JESSBE.
It shows you how old I am. I didn't have the Freedom of Information Act.
No, man.
Wow.
Yeah, so people will get quoted based on meetings and things. All right,
But yeah, I do think anytime we have something of controversial or importance,
right.
we really have to work on the presentation, you know, to the public as well as not just the commissioners and all. And it's been sorely lacking coming, you know, from the city. And I think there is a communications person. They should be very interested in anything that we do and make sure that it is stated.
yeah, I'll put that with the communication. I mean, just for the newspapers here, obviously if afterwards they have a question, BOC, RDE, one of them. So you never know what soundbite you're gonna get.
Okay, thank you.
I can show you some headlines where my sound bites were.
This is the last thing I'll ever say.
They took a certain
And
word
it
out.
wasn't good.
No cards are not, flashcards are not accepted.
Okay. Excellent. All right, so that's good. I think that'll give us some, now, new business. Items to move forward. I started putting them down and then I just put others because we had a whole list of them. Let me read through the list that we talked about, and then I think what I'd like to do is maybe begin to order them. But just let me read them at this point. We had talked about shuttles, curb cut requirements, online permit sales, special events parking. That was parking around Seawitch and things like that. The parking garage, which is already on there. Long-term parking for residential issues, and employee parking. And the zoning is on here, which we talked about requiring more spaces for building.
Is the shuttle that is mentioned here, is this traveling through town shuttle that would move people around as opposed to shuttling them in from outside of town?
I think it can be either, and I do think that the Transportation Committee's looking at that. But I think what we want to do is make sure that we are on board with what it is that we want to recommend to them even.
Right.
And so one of the things that came up through all the meetings, if you remember when the public was coming up, was don't take away the permit parking for free after 5 o'clock because my employees. It's hard enough to get my employees, and I appreciate that. So one of the challenges we have is employee parking. But that then goes into the debate, is it the city's responsibility to create employee parking, or is it the city's responsibility to create incentives to figure out how to deal with the employee parking, or are the employees on their own? And, you know, I
The
don't.
city should facilitate conversation and allow the restaurants have got a lot to invested in this, and they're having a hard time competing for, as we all are, competing for people to come and try and work here, you know, because the parking is a problem for employees. So, I mean, yes, the employees that are parking here, they've got their issues to how to find parking, but then the businesses have trouble finding people to even sign up to deal with that problem. So I think, you know, we should, because we have a vast knowledge of all the parking issues and all that, maybe we create a task force or a subcommittee or something like that and try and get as many big time employers in here, or high number employee count numbers of those businesses to come and see what they can come up with, but work with them there, and maybe we've got access to the, you know, Del Dot when it comes to park and ride. One of the big challenges to park and ride is when the shifts end, you could sit there for 45 minutes waiting for it. Now, who's going to do that? You know, and yet when no one's using it, it's coming at a fast, regular time. But then, you know, Del Dot doesn't want to have that many people running buses at midnight, but that's when we really need it. So what can we do? I mean, and I think they're intelligent, entrepreneur people, think differently, and might be able to come up with solutions.
So employee parking would be one topic.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like one of the biggest challenges here, because every time a business goes out and a restaurant comes in, you've got how many customers that need parking new to that place and how many employees are in that spot. So like my footprint as a store, I have three or four employees with cars, and I might have 3 or 4 active customers that are shopping that have cars here. If that was a restaurant, it would be like 20 some and 40 some. Right. So, and every time, you know, so we lose the university, which had very little during meter time, you know, or even at the end of the day. It was all morning and a little bit in the meters, and then they quit. To now is Nalu, and I mean, I love it. It's a beautiful place. I think it's an enhancement to our neighborhood, but now all of a sudden it's got a much larger parking footprint than what was there prior. And, you know, you're about to get agave and you're about to get this, you know, it's like all of a sudden now we're going to have, It's gonna be a big, big
Doesn't
issue.
this tie really well into the garage situation though? Because wouldn't it be great to have a designated floor or something in the garage where an employer could reserve X number of spaces for so many dollars a year and so forth and
They could,
provide
it's
employee
expensive,
parking?
but yeah, they could.
Keep in mind, it's only 300 spaces.
Right, yeah.
So when you start divvying up for employee, that to me is gonna be an operational issue. The city's gonna have to decide is it employee parking or is it transient parking? Is it a mix of it? And some of that's really gonna be determined by the company that owns and operates, because it's a cost factor. However, getting back to this, I think employee parking is
Yes.
one of the topics.
I think it's a big, big.
I
Yes.
think that we need to figure out what some recommendations are, and one of the notes I did put is that at the very least, maybe ask one of the bigger employers to come to one of our meetings to kind of give some insight on that.
One, to find out what are the issues that
Yeah.
they're facing, and then come up with a solution.
Yeah, you saw, we had Jeff, but, you get like Jeff from Finn's, and you get someone from, Big Fish Group, and you get
I can get someone from Dogfish.
Right, Dogfish, and
Without
you
a
can
doubt.
get someone from, who else is, the Derricksons with Conk and Nalu
Well,
and
and
stuff like
maybe
that.
when we get to, it seems to me that maybe what we'll end up doing is coming up with a list and then devoting each meeting to like two of the topics max, because it's so much to investigate. And that one would be one where we would invite some, does that sound?
Or we can maybe possibly, I wouldn't mind like chairing that and just get them all together and have like a preliminary meeting, and then I could come with one or two or none and just with all the findings, so that we don't necessarily
Okay,
have to do, anything, we're just throwing ideas out.
let's get the topics first and then figure out how to tackle it. So employee parking,
Definitely.
my big thing is the zoning. I don't know if it's even too late, but trying to find a way to get more spaces required as in the bigger houses. 2 for 5 bedrooms just doesn't seem ample.
Yeah, a neighbor just, a friend of mine just had a new home go up in the neighborhood that's exclusively rental, and it's like all of a sudden the street in March and April is like impossible to park on. It's off-season, it's crazy, right? A big one, they come in
It's
5
kind
or
of my
6
pet
cars.
thing, but I'd like to see us, now, never mind, I won't say that. We couldn't get some of these other things passed. I don't know how zoning's gonna happen, but, 5 bedrooms, 6 bedroom, most of the houses being built now are 5 bedrooms. That seems to be the norm.
5 bedroom, I think.
5 bedroom, 5 baths
very-
because of the size, but still that's 5 or 6 cars typically, at least 4.
Or more.
And 2 spaces just doesn't seem to make it. And then the opposite I hear all the time is, well, then that's gonna take away from green space. But the truth is, I'm gonna do the calculations by the time we talk about that. When you put those strips in only, which is allowed, the amount of green space that you're actually taking up is minimal because of all the green space that you have in between. So I think that's not as good of an argument as some people are trying to make
I'm
it.
curious, maybe you can tell me, what do the realtors say when a client calls them and says, I've been driving around for an hour and can't find a parking space anywhere near my rental house?
I haven't heard
That must happen.
Well, first of all, I'm not in rentals, so
Oh, right.
maybe I don't get the
I'm
calls.
just asking
but-
you, but I'm just curious, because it must happen, especially down in like neighborhoods like yours that are 3 or 4 blocks. There are no spaces.
Well, no, I think the issue of what happens and then impacts the year-round tenants in particular is when they come with 4 and 5 cars, they only use 1 or 2 while they're here. So
Absolutely,
they,
that
they,
happens.
they park the others on the street, take them up for the entire week,
Right.
don't move them,
Yeah.
and the ones that they're moving in
guess
and out of the driveway.
And that's the trend. It used to be, now that we're going on 14 years, 14 years here. So early on, 2, 3 o'clock, it started getting busy. By 5 or 6 o'clock, you couldn't find a place. Now it's, what we see happening is Saturday morning, at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, cars come in. Now, there's still cars in the street from the people that haven't left. And so they jockey and they find their spots. And they sit then and never move those cars for those 7 days. And the 2 cars that they use, they put in the driveway of the people. And so, and when that happens with 5 or 6 or 7, or in our case, 12 houses of 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 bedrooms, You know, there's no spot, it's not uncommon now to go out at 7 o'clock in the morning and there's no spots.
Well, that's my point. It's gonna reach full capacity at some point if it hasn't already, and it has already in some areas. And then what? You know, then what?
I know some places will say, all right, on Mondays, we're cleaning this side,
Yep.
so
Yeah.
you can't, for 2 hours, you
Street
can't park
cleaning.
there.
That was
Just
always
2 hours, and then whether they cleaned it or not, you had to be off for 2 hours, and that
alternate
forced
street.
people to move
alternate
around.
side, so that's one of those things that I wanna also put on with zoning, is also looking at the permit program. And because right now, the permit program hasn't been looked at for a long time, and there are options, alternate side parking. You know, one side's residents only, one side is open for people. There's lots of options, so I think that goes hand in hand with that.
And the other one.
Definitely
that
not
was
gonna
mentioned
talk on
very
tape on
early
that
on, to add to that would be parking districts.
Yeah,
You know, that's to be discussed at least.
well, I just put RPPs basically in general, districts. Are part of that, it could at least discussion. All right, so we have employee parking, we have zoning, we have the permit system. We talked about special events, we talked about the shuttles, to put shuttles on.
I think special events fall under so many, a lot of those things. But just to, you know, like, here's a good example. Are we involved in parking? They had this marathon, and it was on Sunday, yet they closed from Friday 5 a.m., 54 parking spaces from like the beginning.
On Easter
of-
weekend.
Yeah,
It was the weekend
Last
before.
weekend
weekend.
before.
Oh, weekend before.
From the west side of Grottoes all the way around past me to where Nalu is. No parking. There was no one parked there Friday or Saturday, but Sunday they had some, you know, first responder type, you know, and people that were involved in the race, and then they were all gone by whatever time. That was 50 on a weekend, beautiful weekend, 54 spaces downtown. I mean, that to me is a special event. Someone's got to look at it and say, you know, hey, hold time out. We don't need all that. Their festival was 3 days, but they're only in Rehoboth on Sunday. And yet they closed those on Friday and Saturday. I mean, that was, for those of
Why
us
should
that
they
were.
get priority anyhow? You know?
Well, and then the other thing is, then you look at it and it's an event that has absolutely nothing to do with Rehoboth.
Sure.
None of the money stayed in
Right.
Rehoboth, and it really wasn't a nonprofit type of event. But
The
that's
reason
like a
that they
whole,
should have
that's a
priority.
different thing.
Well, but I think that, so I put special events,
But the parking on
parking
that,
restrictions, closings, and that falls into Sea-Witch and a few other things that we've talked about.
Well, and even 4th of July and those sorts of things, events, because I
How
mean,
about Sea-Witch when they park all their cars there Friday night so they can sit on the back of them and watch the
No.
parade and the whole street?
they start parking on Wednesday.
Oh, they're Wednesday now.
Absolutely, Wednesday.
well, no, now they did talk about enforcing that, I think it's a 48-hour rule that they can't, a car can't be in one spot for more than 48 hours.
I don't know that that was determined, because this year washed out.
Right, but the word got out. So there weren't nearly as many, because I'm right there. I mean, those spots right where I am,
Yeah.
they're usually there maybe even a week before that
Oh, they're all the
too.
way up to the library and beyond.
Because they get it when they can
The
see
biggest
perfect
tailgate party
turnaround.
It is.
Turnaround, they can see it from the front and from the side. I have a couple of my friends and customers that do it, so I'm not ratting them out ever, but.
All right,
it
so I
does
got
happen.
employee
But I do like
parking,
the special event thing.
zoning, residential permits, shuttles, special events
For new stuff, right?
for new stuff,
For new stuff.
2019 agendas.
plus looking at this old stuff. Seems to me that that's a pretty good plate.
It's pretty
full.
busy.
I mean, yeah, because we got all the old stuff, pretty much covers
Yeah.
almost everything.
All right, so what I will do for the next agenda then is put on the old things, and I'll put all of them on so that we can tackle as many as we get to. And then we can start looking at whether it's just watch, recommend change, keep as is. So, or, you know, whatever in between all of those things are. And then we'll start hitting the newer topics. And I think the other newer topics, the other one I would put on here is sort of this whole zone, what we talked about earlier, the zoning changes, you know, with all the hotels that are coming in and potentially clear space or whatever, is just encouraging that those that are required at this point continue to be required to provide, because you can't keep overloading the system and not having it. You know, there's all sorts of ways to handle that, and that could be some of the things we looked at. We used to have it in lieu of fees, where developers didn't have to necessarily provide the parking that they were required to park, but then they had to pay a fee to us in lieu of building the parking that in return would then fund the next facility or something. So there's all sorts of ways that you can do it, where the challenge we have is we don't have a whole lot of space, so we can't continue to build parking garages. And I don't know that that's what we want to do, but that's how we
The
fund it.
responsible ones seem to be trying it, like putting parking, with the grottos, when they want to put parking underneath, you know, which seems a responsible idea. At least they're trying to meet the parking requirements. Place like Clear Space, they just came out of the blue. We're just not going to have any parking. You know, they don't even attempt to make a parking commitment. So.
Okay. Anybody talk to anybody about new committee? Because, you know, here we are, us five.
I had one who said no.
Yeah, it's a really popular thing. It used to be like what I did for my living, and you'd go to a cocktail party and you said you were like parking authority, and you were over there and the rest of the.
I work for the IRS.
I'm from the government, I'm here to help.
Definitely make your own drinks at those parties.
Well, the problem is, Chris, what do we need? We ought to look at what we need. We have residents.
I would love to get someone from the restaurant business.
So that's really what we need. We ought to maybe emphasize.
I'll talk to some people.
Okay.
For their.
I think a restaurant person would help us
I agree.
significantly with the employees at this point. I would also like to get, I mean, we've got the realtor side of it. I like the fact that we had Brian, but, you know, he hasn't really been active at all, so.
And he's not going to.
Yeah.
Talk to him about that.
Okay, so we have the future agenda items. Anything from our citizen?
Or the media.
Or the media? Or June? Huh?
I'm your guest.
You can be a guest.
We all covered a lot, thank you. I actually intended to come to more of the meetings, it's just been a timing issue. But I will say that everything you're talking about is going to be so important to talk about during the CDP process. I just can't emphasize that enough. So I'm going to take the topics, whenever we we will very soon be setting the schedule for public meetings. And when we do that, you know, I don't know whether there's going to be one specifically about parking, or there's going to be one on various topics, all of which parking is an element of. But I think all of these should come out, and I'm just glad to kind of get up to speed.
All right, well, we'll keep trying to either be part of it or follow behind when we find out about things.
Read them in the paper. Keep up the good work. We need it.
Here's a question. As we read the paper or watch television, we see a new hotel proposed. That peripherally affects us. We should be discussing this, and like we talked about Clear Space, you know, we tried to keep the name out of it, but it's just, generally we can anticipate that they'd be asking for parking variances.
Well, actually, I have to say that at least the hotels that have come before, most of them are not, because most hotels realize that you have to have parking to make the hotel work.
Yeah, like all three came with sufficient.
With the
parking.
amount.
That
So
would be
they're,
the Bellhaven, that would be the one, the
one we just
one
ruled
on
They
Baltimore,
all have,
and the one over
State
Ocean
Street.
Atlantic.
But as you also said earlier, nobody comes with one car anymore.
but the requirements for the hotels are,
But if they know they only get one space, and then you come with.
is it one per room? I think it's two per room. So I mean, I think so here's what happens, I think, is hotels realize that if without parking,
People aren't gonna come.
they're not gonna make it. The restaurants have learned in town that it's not as big of a factor because of it just being there. There's no disadvantage because no restaurant really has that much parking anymore. You know, Dogfish gave away what they had. I'm hard pressed to think of any restaurants that really have any, so.
One across
Well,
from
because they're
Culture
not-
Pearl.
Well, they're not required.
Until 2 years ago, it was been moved from 1991 to 2 years ago because the code says restaurants over 10,000 square feet.
But they weren't allowed,
Between 1991 and
you weren't allowed to have-
2016, they weren't allowed to be over 5,000 2,000 feet, so it was completely moot.
But the point is, a hotel would be at a distinct
Right.
disadvantage competitively if they didn't have parking and the other 10 in town do.
Restaurants feel like they can.
Restaurants, so, but to your point, I think we need to stay active looking at those. But I can tell you that the 3 that are proposed, at least preliminary at this point, and we just had the hearing on, so I can now talk about it because it's after the fact, but
It's one.
the one on Baltimore Avenue does have the parking that they were required to
And it
have.
is one for each rental room, so I.
Is it one?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
one, and,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I take your point about,
Yeah.
having some people.
But see, they know, when you're going, they.
Know their occupancy.
It'll say, same thing like if you're going and doing a VRBO somewhere and you go to Miami and you find out there's parking, you ask how much parking, you're gonna get 1 space. You're not coming with 2 cars. But here, you got on-street parking, you're gonna come with 50.
For the rentals.
You know,
So-
it's not, there's
And
no
then there's
restriction.
also the problem with the employees of the hotels though, is that adds a big chunk too, and that's not covered in those.
That's not covered in the thing, so, I suppose it could be looked at, but I think
They're more important.
I think zoning, trying to tackle places already are required to have parking will be tough. I think what you see is restaurants like Agave, who designed it with either not knowing that or whatever, but I mean, they were so minimally over the 10,000 that it was a really easy fix, is you cut,
Yeah, they went down by
Cut
like
30
50.
feet.
yes.
They went
And
to
you- and then-
9,950, I think,
Yeah.
right? But they still have to get a variance for that pathway that used to be.
Well, the alley is used by all the other restaurants there.
Right.
And that's where their dumpsters are, and they're asking to do the same thing.
Right, and they're doing that through the city in a license agreement.
Right.
Not a variance, because a variance
But
comes
the
through
10,000
parking.
was like created a path, I think, between like
Something
either
I-
Summer
yeah.
House and theirs or from that other building and theirs.
I don't know if that'll come before us or not, but.
It was
So-
something they had to do.
With a parking garage in the evening, you could have a reduced rate to try to draw restaurant people?
It all depends. It's a peak demand thing. If you go to major cities, what you see is sort of the early bird special, in by 8, out by noon. And then, so that's trying to capitalize on a certain group. And then, our prime time really, if you think about it, is from about 10 o'clock until 4 for beach traffic, right? And then from 4 till midnight for for restaurants and everything else. So we really have a peak time from about 10 to midnight. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I think the pricing of what's charged in the garage and rates like that will be up to the people that build it and are
Right.
paying for it, not us.
But as he said, if they can't price themselves
No,
out.
they'd be wise enough to be competitive. Sure.
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of them want to be able to control both on-street and off-street rates.
Sure. They'd raise them all.
Or to make it, because you want the balance where the most expensive is on the street, so that's supposed to be the shortest term, most expensive parking in the world of, parking 101. And that drives long-term parkers into a debt. And that's supposed to be less expensive.
Another random issue that I saw recently was that it's become Friday, everybody's Friday. Yesterday's Friday is today's Thursday on weekends at the beach. Because of so many people working from home, they have the flexibility to start their weekend on Thursday. And that impacts the whole thing for us looking at how long is a weekend, how many days is it?
There is some merit to the conversation of how much more can we handle coming into town.
Correct.
Because of infrastructure, because of police, because of fire, all of those things. However, the viability of our businesses require those people coming in and not just coming in and parking and going to the beach. And so that, Trey, would be the argument I would continue with your customers. I know it's hard, is to say the reason it's higher priced is trying to get those beachgoers to go somewhere else so that there is a spot. I mean, that's been the concept behind it. But, all right, next meeting.
Can we take a look at trying to have a regular meeting date and time?
We can certainly try that. There's 3 challenges.
Okay.
One is that we have to have it in this room.
Right.
And to have it in this room is difficult because we get bumped by any commissioners' special meetings or anything that they're gonna have. And then, from my standpoint, and I would love to, but my standpoint is, my golf schedule makes it really tough for me to be,
That's fine. The flexibility is fine.
yeah. And I know, I would much rather know that it's the fourth Thursday of every month or
Right,
whatever, but looking at the city calendar is tough. That's what happened here. I had
Right.
5 dates, and 3 of them were open, and by the time I went to do it, 2 of them were taken by special meetings,
Okay, that's fine.
so. So we'll be into May. I need enough time to be able to get agendas together and minutes, and then I have to look at schedules, so, for here, but I'm looking at, May 13th, 15th, or 17th.
What day?
That's a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday,
I prefer not a Monday.
and you don't like Wednesdays, right?
Wednesday mornings are not good for me
Right.
at all. Thank you.
But Wednesday afternoons are okay?
17th is sidewalks.
Wednesday
yeah,
afternoons
so
are
it's
Okay, we don't wanna do that then.
You can take half a day Wednesday.
Wednesday in the 15th in the afternoon, tentatively, once I check the city schedule.
There's nothing on the city calendar so far on that.
Oh, that's good, thanks.
Yeah, on the 13th it is, so it's.
I'm out of town, but that's no big deal.
Actually,
Well, no.
I am out of town that week.
Okay,
as
well then let's look at the 20th.
The 20th, there's Park and Shade Tree.
What time?
It's usually at 2, I think.
Mondays you don't like.
But the
My problem is Tuesdays and
I can do
Thursdays
Monday
are
in the
my golf.
afternoon, I mean, if it's an
22nd
afternoon
seems
Monday.
to be open.
Wednesday the 22nd?
Looks to be open.
Wednesday the 22nd? Let's do Wednesday.
Wednesday, May 22nd? At 1 o'clock?
Does one work for everybody? Would you rather
Okay.
later, earlier, 10?
Doesn't matter to me.
Doesn't matter to me.
If I can leave at 2,
well,
or 5 of 2.
Yeah, Wednesday does have to be in the afternoon for me. I can't
Okay.
do mornings.
I could do 3.
You wanna do three?
I got one guy who has to go to lunch at 2, or
Okay.
he dies.
3 o'clock?
3 o'clock works.
Wednesday, May
3 p.m.
22nd at 3 p.m.
Good.
I will
Two on
send
the
Ann,
22nd, okay.
Wednesday, May 22nd, 3 p.m. I'll send Ann, matter of fact, I'll do it right now. So I don't forget.
Does Ann have an office here somewhere?
Yes.
She's back tomorrow.
Before I leave, I'm gonna go ask her to put us on the agenda for
No, I thought
Wednesday.
she was, I think she's, what's today? Monday?
She's not here.
She's not here, she's
Oh.
back tomorrow, right?
Susan, how do we get on the agenda? I think before you came in, we decided we're gonna make a statement.
They'll ask her.
Oh, he'll be able to.
Okay, just like a regular person, so to speak.
Yeah, we're just
Yeah,
irregular.
What is it?
But
Okay.
you could still stand up, I guess, and say you're speaking on behalf of the
Right,
city.
okay, I just didn't know if it was a special format, you had to be on the agenda
No.
ahead of time for that sort of thing.
Okay, Wednesday, May 22 at 3 p.m.,
Okay,
right?
we're on.
Hang on, at 3, let me just get this to Ann, otherwise I'll go home and I'll forget.
Mhm.
All right. We'll adjourn, it is, oh, look at us, 2:15. Thank you guys for everything, I think we'll
Thank you.
make some progress.
All right, great.